that. And talking about oil, Pierre, I mean, this is your absolute specialty here in terms of your fund, but geoeconomics and geopolitics, the impact on critical resources. Oil, hydrocarbons, yes, we're talking about critical minerals and all that, but critical resources, I think oil is still in there, is it?
Yeah, still, I mean, oil still has a future, for some time, so we expect oil demand to peak later this decade, so around 2030, and then decline. But as you know, decarbonization is the electrification of the world, so we'll need more electricity, and for this electricity, we'll need more minerals. And so the oil demand will be very much dependent on the pace of the energy transition. So everything is linked until we can get enough minerals and start the transition. We'll need oil for a while.
Dario, now you're looking a lot in terms of rare earth minerals particularly. So give us a feel for, I suppose, why they are so important and, again, why do we absolutely have to go down that path?
Sure. When people talk about EVs, normally everyone knows about the battery system. But in fact, for EVs, there are two systems. One is the energy storage system of the battery. And second, to convert that electrical energy into mechanical energy, you need the traction motors. So in the traction motors, that's where the rare earth magnets are used. Even if you have the best battery, without the traction motor, the car will not move. So this is one area, one of the biggest areas for rare earth magnets. And the second one is actually in wind turbines. Each windmill would have up to 1.5 metric tons of magnets in them. When you're talking about offshore, the bigger windmills, they actually have more than 1.5 tons. So these two areas are where the magnets are used.
And I mean, it comes at a time when we're seeing, I suppose, all resources out. Robert, you've just come back from China, I believe, recently. Mm-hmm. So tell me, who are you talking to? What are you talking about? And do we all have, do we need to maybe shift our approach to China when it comes to critical resources?
First of all, we're balkanizing the world economy. And as we do that, that's insanely inflationary. And we're devolving in a situation where relationships between the Western world and maybe China and Russia combined are getting worse. We really have to stop having this downward spiral. If this downward spiral persists, the wars that we're seeing in this region will prevent any dream of any kind of energy transition or benefit for humanity. Right now, I'm worried about 1 billion people in the world who get their energy burning firewood. All they need is some form of electricity to have electric lights. So I think it's time to talk about the reality of what's actually has not been achieved in energy transition. We haven't even made the first step.
So, I mean, given the fact that it is, so delicate right now, where does this bode, I suppose, for the future? Because relations with many countries are not very good, but how do we move beyond it, do you think?
We have global inflation because we're breaking down an integrated world economy. We're going from a just-in-time world economy to a just-in-case world economy. And that whole breakdown of global integration competes with the beautiful idea of a greener world for our kids and our grandkids, because the metals that the military need for militarization of all the world's armies are the same metals we need for any dream of energy transition.
Pierre, when you look at the energy transition, I suppose, and see what are some of the challenges there and perhaps the bottlenecks that are there, what comes to mind first?
I mean, outside of, cost, interest rate, regulation, and all these things, I think in terms of really minerals, we need to find, there's enough lithium, so it looks like we might be in a bearish market for lithium for the next 4 or 5 years and then get tight maybe. In cobalt, it looks relatively balanced for the next few years. In graphite, relatively balanced as well, or a little bit tight in graphite. But the big issue is in copper. So good old copper looks like we have an issue as mining supply is expected to peak in a couple of years and then go down for a while demand is accelerating between the energy transition and also, as Robert said, about the militarization of the world. So I think we might have an issue with copper. It takes 10 years to bring a new mine to market. So I think that might be the the first bottleneck in terms of physical commodities.
Okay, so Robert can solve that one for us. What kind of an issue do we have with copper?
It's a ridiculously huge issue, and everybody's walking around in a dream without a clue. We need to mine as much copper in the next 22 years, which is tomorrow morning, as we mined in all of human history, going back to Mohenjo-Daro 6,000 years ago. And the world's copper mines are like little old ladies laying in bed waiting to die. So how are you going to electrify the world economy and keep all these lights on without copper? If you're going to stop burning oil and you're going to stop burning coal, we're going to freeze in the dark without an order of magnitude greater amount of mining from the mining industry.
Dario, when we'll come back to copper, because I think we're looking at rare earth minerals, we're looking at all of the other, but again, I like this idea that we cannot overlook what we really desperately need, that basic copper is going to actually help everything else. But Dario, talk to me about, particularly rare earth. This is your specialty, this is your happy space where you are. China's leading the way, but also it has the majority of access. So I suppose give us a feel for how that has happened and the impact that can have on the rest of us.
Let me analyze the whole value chain of rare earth, from mining to separation to magnet manufacturing. On the mining side, China is indeed endowed with good resources. In the north, we have the light rare earth, which is actually a byproduct of an iron ore mine.
Okay.
So you're mining iron ore, and we have been doing that since 1957. We're mining that iron ore, and within this iron ore, there's about 5 to 7% of REO. So basically, this rare earth is free because all the cost has been allocated to the iron ore. At this mine is, we're talking about 10 to 20 million tons of, it's low grade, Robert, it's not what you mine. It's 34%. So 10 to 20 million tons per year, we're still putting a lot of the rest in the tailings dam. Now, this tailings dam, as far as I understand, has about 200 million tons of tailings in it. You do the calculation, 5% of that is the rare earth, light rare earth, that China holds without doing anything. And this is free. This is light rare earth. And then China also has the heavy rare earth down south, in Guangdong, in Jiangxi province. And this is really something unique because rare earth, for heavy ones, you're talking about dysprosium and terbium, which is very crucial for magnet making. So that's the mining side. Separation side, I go back to 1992 when Deng Xiaoping made the very famous comment. He said, the Middle East has oil, China has rare earth. And that's when the country realized that we have something which is unique in the world. Of course, that's the Inner Mongolian mine he's talking about. And from that point on, China has done a lot of research in separation technology. As of today, the Baotou Rare Earth Institute has 500 people doing research on rare earth. I mean, that's probably many times the combined number of engineers you have elsewhere of China. So separation, China has the technology. And then at the end is the magnet production, where China is producing about, I would say, 95% of the rare earth magnets, compared with another 5% in Japan. So throughout the whole value chain, China is doing all the work. And I must add, back in the 40 years ago, actually the US was the mining giant in terms of rare earth. Robert, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, everything you say is true.
I understand that Mountain Pass, California, was the biggest mine.
Yes.
And which they then idle because maybe they feel, okay, let others do the dirty work. It's not a very sexy business. It's not a very profitable business. And when you mine the output, you have a lot of tailings, you have a lot of wastage. That's for California. It's an environmental cost.
Yeah.
So this is how China got here. I think it's after 40 years of efforts from mining up to production. And that's where we are.
Robert, come in. But are other countries also at a huge disadvantage because of the benefits for China right now?
First of all, we need our Chinese brothers if you want rare earths. By the way, rare earths are not rare and they're not earths. So there's a lot of misunderstanding. We are not going to save this planet by giving 8 billion people an electric car. In case you think we're building 8 billion electric cars, we're going to reduce global warming gas, you're insane. If we build 1 billion electric cars and everybody plugs it into the grids will just roll over and die. So there's so much misinformation about what we're trying to do here. We're absolutely dependent on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to maintain basic energy stability and the neighboring countries here in the Middle East. And adding 8 billion electric cars will do nothing whatsoever to reduce global warming gas. 50% of what's in an electric car is hydrocarbon to make the plastic so that it's lighter. So there's just so much greenwashing and nonsense. It's time we start talking about the truth. So we'll start with rare earths. They're not rare and they're not earths, but only the Chinese know how to refine them and make useful materials to build an electric car. But we do not need to build electric cars to save the planet. It's not true. We need to provide basic food, water, and everything that normal human beings need for 8 billion people. There are 1 billion people that don't even have access to electrical energy. And any of that is going to need an enormous amount of mining if you want to reduce the consumption of oil and coal. Now, we can do it in 3 generations. Maybe we can do it, you know.
We do have to get started as well.
Well, we're making little baby steps for baby feet. We're
No,
burning more crude oil today than at any moment in human history. And don't forget it.
No, we're with you on that. Forgive me for the fight that's going on with the audio out here. We're finding it a little bit difficult here. But there's nothing I can do at the moment. They've quietened down. So please let me bring you in here while they've quietened down. I'll be quiet. Come back to China. I mean, China, Pierre, is of great importance for everybody, okay, on the rare earth. But it's not everybody's best friend, so to speak. How do we actually resolve that? And how can we, I suppose, you know, is it now forget about China and start developing resources everywhere else? Or we have to try and do both?
I think we have to try to do both. I mean, clearly we are running the risk of a fragmentation of the global free trade order, at least, if not more. And that's, really tricky. It brings a lot of issues. I mean, we've been used to like free trade, and what if we don't have it, right? What about if the world really ends up working, with like 4 different blocks trading within each other? Then it means you have to build, 4 times the same thing. You'll have to have like mines everywhere to produce the same thing. So the cost of production at first goes up, but eventually you get oversupply because we would actually produce too much of the same thing. So you'll have inflation at first, deflation later. But I mean, the best would be to find a way to get along, right? But it takes at least two to tango, right? It's not. We need to be able to, find like a common understanding. And the issue in global power politics is that you always have, one pushing the other to understand, the order of the great powers. And so it's very hard to, for everybody to sit at the table and to find an agreement, unfortunately. So they always want to push the boundaries. And it's hard to predict over a 10-year horizon what will happen.
Dario, I mean, when we think back, I suppose, to the 2010 rare earth conflict that with many countries, and looking at geopolitics and geoeconomics, what is China looking at when they see, I suppose, this challenge coming from the rest of the world? You have troubled relations with many countries, but at the same time, you could actually help many countries.
We also have a lot of friendly relations with a lot of other countries. But anyway, back to 2009 and 2010. China cut the export quota of rare earths by 40%. Now, the export quota was never used up even back then. One of the reasons for that cut was when you look at heavy rare earth production, mining, you're actually using acid to leach the ground. That creates a lot of environmental damages, especially in the very scenic Jiangxi province and northern Guangdong. So that was actually one of the main reasons for cutback of that quota. That cut actually woke a lot of people up. The Japanese started to react. The Japanese magnet makers, they started to put their factory in China instead of just making them in Japan. And secondly, because of the reliance on dysprosium, which is very expensive and which is only available in China, they decided to do innovation. So Shinatsu Chemical is one of the three magnet makers in Japan. They introduced this concept called grain boundary diffusion. Instead of adding the dysprosium into the element, they use a very thin ring of that. This is getting technical. But the Japanese handled the crisis relatively well by going to China, and secondly, by doing innovation. The Americans and the Australians, they saw the opportunities. So the idle plant, the idle mine of Mountain Pass was restarted, and Lynas Corporation in Australia started to mine iron ore in Australia. But of course, the Australians also didn't want to damage the environment, so they put the separation plant in Malaysia. This is very typical Australia. You mine the products and then you let it process somewhere because it's not clean.
But that has to change as well.
That has not changed.
But it has to.
Yes. And then the Germans, very radical. One of the top CEOs of a German automaker said, back in 2010, no more rare earth in our cars. Now, I think that one statement basically stopped the development of EVs in Germany for 10 years.
Pay no attention to her. She's not talking to us.
Yeah. So every country was taking a different reaction to the export tariff cut. And I think along the way, Japan has progressed, the US and Australia have progressed, and Germany has turned back the table and say, oh, we have to catch up. So this is how the world has evolved since 2009, 2010.
Do you want to come in on this? We are going to have an opportunity in this round to take a few questions, so please be thinking about it. Joanna's here with the microphone. Rashid is on that side, so there's no excuse. Be thinking, and if you want to, okay, while you're here, try and give one question to one person.
Maybe Robert. We keep hearing about copper shortages, but the price doesn't move. The market must know about the supply peak and the lack of storage and demand, so...
There's no such thing as the market. It doesn't exist.
You've given him a gift of a question.
The question was, why is the copper price at $3.50 a pound? It's because the Fed is raising rates every single day, and there's a war that's broken out in Russia and the Middle East. So people are scared and very short term about what's happening in the world today. But if we don't build more copper mines, there's no energy transition. Forget about it.
I think if I can add something to that.
So don't confuse short-term financial manipulations with what the real story is here.
The bigger supply. Please, come in, Pierre.
I'll add something. I think in metals you have a bunch of very short-term players, and there's very few funds that can hold positions for years. So I think the market is not doing its job to give the price signal to actually tell the market we need more copper, like come. I mean, if it was working well, we would have had much higher copper price even 5 years ago. We're waiting to have no more copper for the price to go up. I mean, it's ridiculous. But this is the world of algorithmic trading, right? I mean, they don't look at anything else.
Oil went to zero, remember? It was at a negative price.
That made sense, though.
Why did it go down when it's $100 a year later? Don't worry about financial markets. We're talking about the real world here.
And again, I mean, we'll talk a little bit about investment because ultimately it is about, as you talk, making sure we have extra supply. We have another question here. Let us know your name and who you want to ask.
Hi, I'm Christine Burka with Bloomberg News. Pierre, I have a question for you just in regards to the broader oil market. What are your views for oil prices going into year end, just given the Israel-Hamas conflict? And are you adding to your bullish wagers, all things considered?
Don't jeopardize my whole panel here, going back to oil prices. we are looking at critical minerals and that, but I'll allow this question since he's such an expert on it. So,
Well, I think it's very much in the hands of the Saudi, and they'll decide at what price, they'll bring supply back. So I think right now we're in an environment where we have very low inventories. The speculative lens is low. So despite all the geopolitical, issues that we have today, it hasn't been met by more speculative positioning to bet on higher prices. Most of the funds have been betting on lower prices, despite the fact that fundamentals are strong. So we have low inventories. Inventories are expected to go down towards the end of the year and even in Q1. And so the market will have to beg for more Saudi supply at some point. So the Saudis will decide when and at what price to bring oil supply. For me, I think it will be, but that's just my personal opinion, I think it's likely to be around $110 a barrel, not before. So I think there's room to the upside for oil prices. And then we'll have to see, if the development of the Israel-Gaza, situation, Hamas situation, will develop in a regional war. I mean, it's not impossible that we end up having, confrontation with Iran directly, and then, all bets are off, concerning how high oil prices could go.
I'm going to keep him available for interviews for the media afterwards, okay? But this is the hazard of opening the questions here. But please be thinking of any more. Wait till the microphone comes to you. Rashid's on the case here. So,
Robert, the question is for you. I heard about oil, but don't forget that in our days, 70% of our consumption is coming from gas. So basically, what is your view? Gas. This is the most important.
When I said oil, I meant gas as well.
Yeah.
Hydrocarbon. We don't want to slide gas. The only reasonable transition fuel is LNG. Sure, we agree. Merci bien.
and Robert, stay with that. I mean, you talked about how Saudi has the ability to, kind of keep the lights on in the world at the moment and balance that. But also, let's talk about exploration in Saudi, and I suppose the new mining future here. That as we look around the world where we're going to get minerals, what are we going to get here, and what are you doing here right now? Apart from having a good time and hanging out with us.
We're very fortunate to have a joint venture with Ma'aden,
Yeah.
the state mining company of Saudi Arabia, to find metals in the country. Allah was so kind to this country with the discovery of oil in 1937 that nobody bothered to look at the metal endowment. But the country has an incredible potential metal endowment in copper, in precious metals, in lithium, probably in rare earths as well. They're not only in China. They're not rare and they're not earths, and they're all over the place. In fact, there's a major rare earth discovery right here in Saudi Arabia. So Allah has been very kind to this country, and soon it will be seen what their metallic resources actually are.
Pierre, when we look at other countries, apart from the ones that we see, all the the key minerals at the moment, and particularly here, they put a new plan together. They put the new focus on the mining, and we have a big conference coming up early next year to be looking specifically at that, and it's attracting so much attention too. But talk to me about why Saudi Arabia can become a player in the new energy future.
I mean, that's great that there's the appetite, right? So the government is bringing a lot of incentives to bring metals mining and to become a metals hub. That will depend very much. So they believe that there's $1.3 trillion worth of minerals, but that will depend really what they can map, like the minerals they can find, and if they can develop it at a good enough price. So it's good to try. Let's see. It's clearly there's a role to play for Saudi Arabia. And we need, more. We are so dependent on China for minerals. I mean, like for example, for mainly the battery metals. So, if you look at graphite, you look at lithium and cobalt, they actually refine more than 80% of world supply. So it's not only about the mining; it's like the refining. We are super dependent on China for the battery metals. So we will need more countries to come in the race, right? If we are serious about the energy transition, and we'll need to make more and more batteries, to have more mining and more refining of metals. And it's good that Saudi Arabia is visionary about that. Yeah.
Dario, energy security is important for everybody, in the world. But clearly we need access to, rare earth. We need access to other critical minerals and that. I mean, are we at a position where if we have no minerals, we have no energy transition, basically. Is that what we're going to face? It's maybe not that simple, but
I think there will be different pathways for the auto industry, which I focus on to develop. Of course, EV is one where you would depend on China for the lithium batteries, you would depend on China for the rare earth magnets. But then you have another way of actually continuing. Robert would like to hear this. I think the internal combustion engine has a long way to go in terms of energy or fuel efficiency. So in terms of the auto mix, I think that is also going to stay, which will release some of the critical mineral concerns that the OECD countries have. And thirdly, there will also be the hydrogen cars, where you can use fuel cells. The Germans and the Japanese are very advanced in that, much more advanced than China in terms of that development. But then we will be talking about the platinum in South Africa, the platinum palladium in Russia. So, either way, you would need the oil from Saudi Arabia, you would need the platinum palladium from Russia or South Africa, or you would need the rare earth in China. There's no way out.
I think you want to come in on that,
You
Robert.
need everything. Isn't that blatantly obvious? We got 8 billion people on this planet. Everybody wants everything all the time. People get on the internet. Everybody wants Manolo Blahnik shoes and a Birkin handbag. There's 8 billion people that want everything. There's no way to get there from here without an ocean more of metallic production and human cooperation. We could push the wrong button here today and oil would be $300 a barrel tomorrow. So we're living in a fragile world, and we have to work with our Chinese brothers. They're very, very helpful and very useful. But we got to stop fooling people about these words, energy transition, without even defining what is energy and what are we transitioning to. We're transitioning to try to feed everybody on this planet in a fair way. We got 1.4 billion people in Africa alone who want this same lifestyle. So we need cooperation, and we need hydrocarbon. We need natural gas. Yes, you're right. We need LNG. We need a lot more metal. And rare earths are okay, but they're not rare and they're not earths. They're common metals. They're all over the planet. If you want to take the size of the rare earth market, it would fit in that paper cup. And crude oil is bigger than this whole conference center.
Yes.
We keep on talking about rare earths. Let's talk about crude oil. It's as big as this conference center. The rare earth market would fit in my pocket. It's so small.
And that's got to change. Please, if anybody wants to sit in the front, I'm not sure why we have reserved seats, but please come and sit in the front. We have 15 minutes left, so we still have a great opportunity to have some good conversations. So if there's an empty seat, sit on it and don't worry about it. Somebody just didn't show up. Sir, we have a question in the back, please. Yeah, the sound is a bit challenging here, so forgive us.
It's impossible.
No, that's not going to work. We will get you a microphone. Don't worry.
Come on up here. Don't be shy.
Hi, Yasser Yaqub with Vision Invest. I've greatly appreciated your discussion on minerals as a critical resource, but I'd be interested to hear your views on potable, clean water as a critical resource.
Ah,
Great.
okay, Robert, it's for you.
So water is the ultimate commodity. We really need it. In mining, we need 2 cubic meters of water for every cubic meter of rock we crush and grind to liberate metals. So we need a tremendous amount of water development on the planet, and one could speculate that water is already more valuable than crude oil. If you want to look at the price per barrel, water would be one of the ultimate commodities, which gets back to basic human needs. We need food, we need water, and we need basic energy for 8 billion people. We're not transiting any kind of energy transition. We need more energy of all kinds, intelligently given to everybody, so that we don't get jealous of each other and blow each other up, because that's the path that we're on. And I'm arguing for people to start to understand each other. And we shouldn't objectify China. That's 1.4 billion people. They're our brothers and our sisters, and they bring a lot to the solution to these problems.
Again, it's, I think energy is very water, heavy in terms of its resources, so something we need to look at. We have another question coming from the audience on that side. So please
Can
If
you
there's
hear me?
anything here, Joanna's around.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Why don't we hear more about nuclear? I'm missing a whole discussion
Nuclear,
here,
yeah.
on nuclear energy.
There we go.
which
We're
is-
missing it too. It
Which is
wasn't on
really
my
the
list.
highest energy return on investment. It's proven, it's safe. There's new technology, small nuclear reactors, which reduce
wanna
the
take that,
overall
Robert?
systemic risk. Where is that missing, and why are we missing this?
Okay, let Pierre take that one off,
Sure.
and Robert will be thinking.
I mean, in Asia, so in China and Korea, they're actually building more reactors, right? In Europe, it's been slow. So we had, I mean, as you know, Germany stopped, got out of nuclear reactors that were working very well. But then you have like a few countries like France, Finland, UK, bringing new large reactors. The problem is that it takes, we kind of lost, we don't know how to do it really well. So they come, for the large nuclear plant that we did in Europe, they came at 5 times the price, the expected price, and with, a decade or more, like being late. So, but hopefully by trying more, like we'll learn again how to do it, and we'll be able to do more. But it needs at least 10 years to bring like a new nuclear plant. But we have to work on it. As you say, it's something that works well, that's safe despite all the fears. It works very well. Then we have the small modular reactors that so far only China have been experimenting with. I think there is only one in the US that's being built. So far, the cost is pretty high. It's like $170 a megawatt hour. So, but hopefully, with building more of them, the cost will go down. Something we haven't spoken about as well is thorium reactors. So thorium is actually something that's even safer and cleaner than uranium reactors, but it's a completely different technology. So you can't use uranium reactors to use thorium. So you have to build a completely new plant. But I agree with you that that the easiest solution for the electrification of the world is to go back towards nuclear, and I think we will, because there's no other choice really.
Dario.
China has a massive nuclear investment program. But even with that, I think China is probably investing in 50% of the world's total in terms of new builds. But the problem is, even when that's done, we're talking about 3 to 5% of China's energy need. So it's a drop in the bucket, but it's better than nothing, and China is doing that.
Okay, Robert, I mean, we need every form of energy.
Anyway,
We need
nuclear power plants are great. They don't come down from the sky like rain, Arriva built one in Finland. It was supposed to cost $6 billion. It cost $15 billion and was delayed 10 years. The West lost the capability to efficiently build nuclear power plants, and you build them with our metals anyway. They're not made out of butter. So there's no little idea you can come up with and solve the whole problem. A more obvious solution would be Mother Earth. Right under our feet, we have geothermal energy. Mother Earth is a nuclear reactor. This audience might not know it, but Mother Earth is a nuclear reactor. There's enough uranium in the core of the Earth, given the pressures. We have a natural fission reaction in the core of the Earth, so we could just drill down and we have the heat. We're talking to Aramco about that. So there's a lot of potential solutions, all of which require international cooperation, not objectifying the other, avoiding a world war opening soon in a theater near you. It's a really bad idea. And an understanding that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is the energy buffer, keeping energy from being too cheap or too expensive so that at least you can turn the lights on. Without it, we all freeze in the dark.
Pierre, let's have a look at new technology, and Dario, I'll bring you in on this as well. The technology maybe we haven't even thought about, the technology that, should be there, and people are. There's a lot of startups looking at different things. Do we absolutely need the critical minerals out there, or, should we also be investing in just different technologies? Would it lessen the dependency on critical minerals?
I think we have to do, everything we can, right? It's not a luxury problem. We have to make it work. It's an existential issue, really. So we have to do the maximum we can as fast as possible, almost regardless of the cost, really, to actually, electrify the world with low carbon sources. and find new energies. I mean, there's actually more and more fusion startups now. It's hard to believe because fusion has been, we've been speaking about it forever and it's always 30 years away. But some of the startups think that they can have commercial fusion within the next few years. I'm not sure I believe that, but there are some startups out there that believe it.
So
and that would save, that would, I mean, if we can get that fusion working, I mean, that would actually change the story.
The whole dynamics, yes. Dario, let's have a look at, technology, and I know in Japan they're working on technology, but it's quite new at the moment in terms of maybe less dependency on rare earth.
Well,
what do you think about that?
There are only 3 magnet makers in Japan. And one of them, Hitachi Metals, which has been bought by Bain and Company, Bain Capital recently, they announced that they can make ferrite to replace rare earth magnets for the traction motor. Now, that's, I think, technically feasible because you can raise the performance of ferrite magnets, but then you would need a lot of cobalt. So we're going to another metal shortage. Whether you're depending on China on rare earth or you're depending on DRC on cobalt, it's something that's going to be missed. So I think we just have to, as Robert said, to be realistic. You cannot have everything, and you have to be cooperating with the rest of the world.
Talk to me about Africa. I mean, we look to Africa too in terms of, exploitation and, extraction for minerals and that, but how realistic is it that we could get it right in Africa? Robert?
1.4 billion people in Africa, and that's the only place I can go mining and find tier 1 deposits. I can't mine in Russia, can't mine in Ukraine, can't mine in tropical jungles where we have a delicate environment. But there are places in Africa that have incredible mineral endowment, and working with the owners of that endowment, mining has to be completely reinvented. And it can be done, and it must be done, or we'll all freeze in the dark. We just can't get there from here without the African continent.
Pierre, and again, I think the resource exploration has never been too far from geopolitical risk. I think throughout our lives, we might have been depending on a few countries, and we are when it comes to hydrocarbons. We're probably going to exchange that for a few other countries. But either way, there are risks in this. What do you see about growth in Africa?
Yeah, I mean, first, it's important to say that for minerals, the supply is, very dependent on a few countries. Yes. So it's a lot less spread out than for oil. For oil, there's a lot of countries producing it. So if you don't get along with one, maybe, it's fine. And at the end, it's quite fungible. But for minerals, we're so dependent on a few key countries that it's very hard to be completely dependent on it because you don't know how the geopolitical situation will evolve. And it's, I mean, of course, we should all get along and have, and all that, but if the person in front of you doesn't want to, what can you do? You have to have a plan B. And we can never, if you make yourself so dependent on somebody from a country, and that country knows it, they're going to try to get the most out of it. And if that most is too much, then what do you do? So it's about the balance of power. You need to do enough to balance it.
Robert, a quick word on investment. We're looking at what's happening in the US with IRA, and that is actually getting people moving, again in Europe as well. But is there enough investment at the moment? How can we get more investment in, as you say, all forms of energy right now?
No, there's not enough investment. They haven't even made a start. The Inflation Reduction Act, which we sometimes refer to as the Inflation Creation Act, $400 billion. My Chinese friends in central planning, they would take at least 20 or 30 trillion dollars just to replace the American electrical grid so that everybody could plug in an electric car. If everybody bought a Tesla today, if 10% of America bought a Tesla today and plugged it in the grid, the whole grid would just fry and the lights would be out forever. So the capital investment required is so far astronomically beyond the greenwashing you're hearing in the media is just ridiculous, which gets us back to we need the natural gas and hydrocarbon here to keep the world stable while we dream about and try to engineer a realistic transition, which will need orders of magnitude more mining. And the mining will need a lot of electricity as well.
Pierre, the investment climate at the moment, how can we improve it? How can we get governments to be, it's a critical issue. This is life or death out there.
Yeah, it is, but so there's a few issues that actually are going to potentially slow down the transition that are not lack of minerals. It's high interest rates, low economic growth. So every government end up, looking at their own country and stop, planning for the long term because they have their own issues and try to survive. And then if we go back to, large regional war or like bigger wars, all that will, go back. It won't be a priority anymore. So unfortunately, it looks like, high interest rates is bad for it. Clearly, I think it's something that governments do when we're at peace and we have low interest rates and good economic growth, and it's easy. But now we have more and more headwinds to make it work, unfortunately. But they're thinking of the next, surviving the next 2 years and not surviving the next 50 years, unfortunately.
Let's wrap this up, Dario. If there was a quick call to action, what can we do, maybe in the short term, that could really move us forward?
Let me answer you from another way, from another angle. I come from the steel industry, and I have seen how China manages its so-called critical minerals. When China ramped up its steel production in the early 1990s, they were buying 100% iron ore from Australia. Now, that was at a very low base. As time progresses, this volume grows, and China is still buying 1 billion tons of iron ore. Close to 70% comes from Australia. We have about 20% from Brazil, and the rest from the rest of the world. And China is developing West Africa as a new frontier. But I still answer you, if Australia pulls out today, I think the Chinese steel industry would collapse. Even if it's down to 50% of supply, it's going to collapse. So China needs Australia, Australia needs China. It's a mutual relationship, and I think countries can coexist, even though we may not be the best of friends.
Beautiful. Well said.
Okay,
wow.
Robert, your solution.
You nailed it.
Give us that call to action.
Oh, we need an integrated world economy. This is completely crazy to try to balkanize the world economy. And the young Saudis that have inherited this economy are in the catbird seat. Everybody needs Saudi Arabia to keep the situation stable. If Saudi doesn't keep on pumping out 10, 11, 12 million barrels a day, the planet is going to break down. So it's really, really important that we stop objectifying the other and start having a realistic appraisal of where we're going. And by the way, it's getting warmer. It's actually getting warmer. And the Chinese are using 1 billion tons of iron ore a year. Wait till India gets going. They'll need another 1 billion tons of iron ore. What about Latin America? What about Africa? We'll need 5 billion tons, 10 billion tons. Who's going to mine this stuff? Where's this magic going to happen that you keep hearing about in the popular media? We need to get realistic, and we're starting with a hydrocarbon base. And ladies and gentlemen, no matter what you hear, hydrocarbon is not disappearing anytime soon. You may reduce the percentage of hydrocarbon you're burning, but because you're bringing so many billions of people into the world economy, today we're burning more crude oil right now than we ever had in human history.
That's so true.
And we've already invested $4 trillion in the energy transition. It's made no difference at all as to how much crude oil we're burning at the moment. So let's get real about it.
Pierre, given that doom and gloom scenario, give us a quick few words of action, that call to action that might actually help us move forward.
God, call to action. There's nothing simple because it's, I agree with you, Robert, but at the end of the day, if in front of you you have, a country that doesn't want to negotiate with you or come something, you don't know. At the end, we are dependent sometimes on, the personality of a leader, and they don't always do the rational thing.
Yeah.
We can't, expect that. And if they don't, basically we're all screwed. So we have to hope for the best. But in terms of call for action, I think it will help to already have a better geopolitical environment, more peaceful, interest rates going back down, and I think then it will be, I think all governments will push to accelerate the transition as much as possible. Yeah.
Indeed. I mean, I think we are at a very bit delicate time, I think, in the economy, in the world, sort of financially, socially. And again, the big demand on energy is not going to go away. And we have to do something about it, because otherwise, as Robert would say, we're all going to freeze in the dark. I'm going to leave it there, because we certainly don't want to freeze in the dark. But I want to thank you all, for really giving us, your great ideas. Pierre, Robert, and Dario, thank you so much.
Great.
And to our dear audience, thank you so much for being with us. So.